Hey everyone, today I'm going to make a video on the most visible jurors who aren't endgamers, and the video after this will be about the least visible jurors who are also not endgamers. I decided to not include BB2 and BB3 on the list because the jury period of those seasons started from the very beginning, and with those seasons generally having a lot more diary rooms, the early boots would be very high on the list, and I thought it would distort things unnecessarily. Anyways, I am basing this list on seeing the amount of diary rooms that they got overall and dividing it by the amount of episodes they were in. It's not the best metric to analyze visibility, but it's one of the easier ones to use. At 20th is Haleigh from BB20, who has a diary room average of 5.43. For some reason, I am kind of shocked, but kind of not shocked that she's one of the most visible jurors in Big Brother USA. I know that they gave her a good edit and wanted her to be the quintessential underdog, especially in the second half of the season. It also helped that she lasted the furthest alongside her alliance. Despite that, I do think a lot of her content was relatively circumstantial due to her low visibility in the first half and not being a big personality overall. At 19th is Zach from Big Brother 16, who has a diary room average of 5.52. To be honest, I was expecting Zach to be a bit higher on the list, but him being in the top section doesn't surprise me whatsoever. While I found a lot of his narration and antics to be very tryhard, contrived, and cringeworthy, he still arguably had the biggest personality within the house, so I am not shocked that he got a lot of narration and focus. Of course, there was Zenki, which was definitely covering new ground for Big Brother at the time, but he was more vulnerable than most of the cast, and he was arguably the sole reason for the minimal drama we got in that boring season. At 18th is Helen from BB15, who has a diary room average of 5.58. So I think Helen got a lot of diary rooms for a few reasons. One is that she's a relatively engaging speaker and was a politician in real life at this point of time, so she had a more charismatic presence, especially compared to her house guests. She was put in a powerful position earlier on in the season, and while she might not have been making a lot of the decisions, she could explain it well in the diary room, unlike most people in that season. I also think that she represented the feminist undertones that ran through the house for a majority of the season. At 17th is Paulie from Big Brother 18, who has a diary room average of 5.59. What is so interesting about Paulie is that his edit for most of his time on the season was that he was given the Golden Boy edit. I guess it makes sense since he is Cody's brother, but also has more personality, was good looking, and did have a lot of control during the season, and did get into quite a bit of drama. On the feeds, he was a jerk the entire time, but we really didn't get to see that until his last week in the house, where he completely had a blow up meltdown, and it's one of the more notable downfalls in recent seasons. It was fascinating to see how someone ruined their edit so quickly, but it was one of the more entertaining things that happened in the season. At number 16 is Matt from Big Brother 9, who has a diary room average of 5.65. I always forget how much of a presence Matt had on his season. I know it's easy to forget since it is BB9, but he didn't do a whole lot on the season, outside of his dynamics with Natalie, which she made somewhat interesting. This was before Jersey Shore becoming big, but they didn't really emphasize the Italian Guido archetype on this show until him, and he did give some interesting diary rooms, so he did come off as a bit more dynamic. Matt was somewhat in the drama during the early weeks, but there was so much drama happening that he kind of got left behind. I think compared to Adam, Ryan, and some of the other guys, he was a bit more interesting. At 15th is Matt from Big Brother 12, who has a diary room average of 5.82. Just from how the cast was set up, it was clear that Matt was supposed to be the mastermind of the season, and he kind of lived up to that role, especially as he was in the brigade and won most of the early HOH competitions for them. With that, and seemingly being more entertaining and better at conveying words than his allies, he was given a lot of the focus and narration within the alliance. I honestly don't have much else to say, but since he came soon after post Dan, his high focus on the season makes sense in that element. At 14th is Rachel from BB6, who has a diary room average of 6.1. To be honest, I wasn't expecting her to be on the list whatsoever. She did win the first HOH and veto competition and won another competition afterwards, if I remember correctly, but she was always on the sidelines compared to most of her allies, especially since everyone but her and Sarah returned for another season. I am literally drawing some sort of blanks as to why she's on this list and how she made it so high. She was okay in diary rooms and was not in a lot of drama or strategy. Sorry for the lack of explanation on this one. At 13th is Amanda from Big Brother 15 with a diary room average of 6.16. I was fully expecting Amanda to be on the list, and where she placed is not shocking to me whatsoever. Not only does she control most of what happened in the season up to her boot, despite only winning one competition in the entire season, but it makes sense since she knew how to play to the camera without coming off as contrived and was a huge drama magnet. Of course, they covered a lot of her vile behavior and covered it, so they tried to give her a golden edit for about 2/3 of her duration until they unleashed it all, which made for a great downfall. At 12th is Britney from Big Brother 14 with a diary room average of 6.23. I mean, she is one of the few veterans in her season, and during mixed seasons, the veterans almost always have a lot of visibility. Since many claim Britney to be the diary room queen, which she isn't, of course production was going to take advantage of this, though she isn't anywhere near as funny as she was in her original season. Unlike in Big Brother 12, she actually does have some power in the season and some agency, even though she didn't win a single competition. I don't have anything else to say. At 11th is Daniele from Big Brother 13, who has a diary room average of 6.32. Of course, with her first season, you start to wonder if her content was circumstantial, due to being the only successful pair in her twist of the season, and winning a bunch of competitions, but Big Brother 13 proved otherwise. Daniele was heavily involved in the strategy and the dynamics of the season, though she would have done better had she not been so involved. Came some witty, cutting diary rooms, and seemed really excited to be there. No matter what she does, Daniele is a polarizing person and is going to make house guests and the viewing public feel something. At 10th place is Davon from Big Brother 18, who has a diary room average of 6.86. This one isn't a surprise to me or anyone else. Despite being the second boot on her original season, where she got a lot of visibility, despite not being relevant to the structure of the house, she got a lot of focus and visibility. It was clear that she was brought back to be a narrator and to engage in the drama, which she contributed to do that in both regards. Davon was a very strong narrator for her time on the season, and she was a part of the strategic dynamics for a bit, and did partake in drama. At 9th place is Justin from Big Brother 4, who has a diary room average of 7.05. I was not expecting him to be on the list whatsoever, since he was kind of boring and so are most people on the season. He only won one HOH and was nominated in his final week, but he was a part of the brief drama that was present in the season, with that weird rectangle drama between him, his ex Allison, his showmance Dana, and his ex's showmance and his adversary Nathan. His season had some of the most diary rooms, so I think that's mainly the reason why he's on the list, and the very early BB seasons like to develop their casts, though I actually think Justin was the least developed out of everyone who made it to the jury phase. So we're going to continue with Big Brother 4 with Nathan, who was at 8th place and who has a diary room average of 7.12. I am shocked that Nathan made it on here, since he's not one of the more interesting people whatsoever in the Big Brother pantheon. I mean, he did win the first HOH and was only nominated in the final week that he was there, so I don't think he was too involved. Maybe it was because he was a part of the very limited drama that did happen on the season, with his strategic blunder pissing people off, and he is more interesting than some of the other dullards, especially the male ones, on the season. I think the main reason he's on here is due to BB4 having some of the most confessionals out of all the seasons, and people liked making fun of him, whether it was the producers or the other house guests. At number 7 is Will from Big Brother 5, who has a diary room average of 7.16. From what I remembered, Will was never really relevant in the main actions of the house. He didn't win any competitions, was never HOH, and was not nominated until his final week, so he was never in the direct line of fire. But he always got narration, even over people who should have that narration and were more involved. This means that they went out of their way to give him content when they didn't have to. He did have a way with words and had some sort of charisma compared to the others that were a bit more awkward in the diary room, so it does make sense. At 6th is Frank from Big Brother 14, who has a diary room average of 7.24. This one doesn't surprise me at all, since Frank was the only newbie, arguably, that was worth a damn on Big Brother 14. He was close to getting on the last 3 seasons beforehand, and they really played up who his father was. Frank had a huge personality, whether you either loved him or hated him, and a majority of the house guests hated him. He won several HOH and Vita competitions, so a lot of the content was circumstantial and got into a lot of drama throughout the entire season, where it was essentially the Frank show most of the time. But we did see in Big Brother 18 that when he is not winning a lot of competitions, he isn't nearly as visible. In 5th place is Cody from Big Brother 19, who has a diary room average of 7.33. This one really is no surprise, though a part of me thought that he was going to be a bit higher. It was clear to most people that he was cast to be the anti-Paul person, and when he won HOH, it only strengthened that. The editors really emphasized his deadpan attitude and the weird things he would do and say, as he was one of the more unique casting choices up to that point. Cody caused a lot of drama in the house and was a strategic fool, which the editors had a great time taking advantage of, while having a more dynamic side to him compared to his house guests, especially with the layers of his romance with Jessica. At 4th place is James from Big Brother 6, who has a diary room average of 7.39. I think what made James great in the diary room and in the season was that he wasn't trying to be anything he wasn't. He wasn't trying to be the funniest person in the room, and wasn't trying to be the most heroic person either. James was placed as the floater of the season, and seeing him make fun of everyone in his own way was great to watch, and he really stood out compared to everyone else. Especially in the season he was in, where there were 2 defined sides. James was put in a unique position and was a breath of fresh air, as he seemed like the most grounded while also not being boring. The bronze prize and placement goes to Jeff of Big Brother 13, who has a diary room average of 8. At the time of Big Brother 13, Jeff was the golden boy of CBS, and this would continue for many years afterwards, so seeing him this high on the list isn't a shocker at all. Many believe that the season was kind of orchestrated to give Jeff the best chances to win, and he was, quote-unquote, the one to beat, according to the cast. He was a proven fan favorite who had a lot of power in the season and got into his fair share of drama throughout the season. Also, Jeff is the only person I recall who was brought back to the diary room explaining his eviction after he was already evicted. Of course, that happened due to how he was eliminated in the double, but that doesn't happen for anyone. The silver prize goes to Rachel from Big Brother 12, who has the diary room average of 8.25. Rachel being so high on the list isn't shocking to me whatsoever. Looking at her journey on Big Brother 12, it is clear that some of her content is definitely circumstantial. She was nominated in the first week, won HOH in weeks 2 and 4, before getting the juror boot in week 5. But from what we also see on Big Brother 13, her content in the season isn't just circumstantial, since she almost always had camera time in every show she does, even in The Amazing Race. Rachel is a good narrator, though she's not trying to be, unlike some good narrators, and she's such a drama magnet on the show. Most of the drama in the season definitely revolves around her, and things get boring quickly after she was booted. They brought her back for a twist a week after she was evicted due to the other house guests being such a bore. And the gold prize goes to Dana from Big Brother 4, who has a diary room average of 10.9. I think this is kind of ironic since she is the first juror in the sequestered format, and she is still the most visible after 19 years. A part of me is shocked with her being the most visible juror who didn't make it to the endgame, but a part of me isn't shocked at all. Dana had the benefit of being on a season that had a lot of diary rooms in general, but even outside of that, she was the narrator that the producers heavily relied on, even when they didn't need to. She then won the first POV, had an HOH, and was booted the week after, but I think she got so much focus because she was one of the very few people on the season who had a huge personality, and most of the drama in that season revolved around her. It's interesting to me that people feel like she wasn't warranted an all-star spot, but Jace and Kaysar weren't, when they had similar journeys and roles on their seasons. So, those are the statistics on who are the most visible jurors who didn't make it to the endgame, which I always consider to be the final 6 in Big Brother USA. I'm going to make the least visible jurors who didn't make it to the endgame list, and then I'll make 2 additional videos talking about the end games. It's really interesting looking at some of the results to see where some people end up and what surprises, or not surprises, are a result of the list. Thank you all for watching, and I'll be back with something soon.